I used to collect bottles just to survive. Slept in stairwells, hid from the rain under bus stops. People walked past me without even looking, as if I was part of the trash I was digging through. But I didn't see garbage. I saw opportunities. And one day I told myself, if I can find value in trash, I can find value in myself. That thought stuck in my head like a spark that refused to die. I was 22, broke and invisible to the world. My jacket smelled of metal and rain, my shoes had holes. But every can I picked up, every plastic bottle I traded, felt like proof that I wasn't done yet. Most people saw trash. I saw currency. Every morning before the city woke up, I'd push an old shopping cart through alleys, collecting what everyone else threw away. It was quiet then, just me, the cold, and the sound of glass clinking. The first time I made $5 in one morning, I treated myself to a hot coffee. The first warm thing I'd had in days. It wasn't about the money. It was about control. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't begging. I was earning. I remember one night clearly, freezing wind, empty streets. My hands numb as I dug through a trash bin behind a cafe. The smell was awful, but then I saw it. A newspaper, still clean, half folded. The headline read, "College dropout turns waste into $2 million recycling company." I just stood there, staring at that headline like it was written for me. He wasn't rich, he wasn't born lucky. He just started. Something inside me shifted that night. I didn't know how, but I decided that one day, someone would read a story like that, and it would be about me. The next morning, I walked into a local library. I hadn't been inside one in years. The warmth hit my face like sunlight. I asked the librarian if I could use a computer. She looked at me, my dirty jacket, my unshaved face, and hesitated for a moment. Then she smiled softly and said, "Sure, take seat number 3. That small act of kindness changed everything. For the next 6 months, I was there every single day. I didn't play games. I didn't scroll aimlessly. I studied waste management, recycling systems, logistics, plastic types. I learned what most people ignored. At night, I'd go back to my usual spots and apply what I'd learned. I started sorting bottles differently, cleaning metals better, selling to different buyers who paid more for sorted material. It wasn't much, but my daily income doubled. And then came my first risk. I saved $50, everything I had, and used it to rent a small storage container behind an old mechanic's shop. It was my first warehouse. 4 walls of rusted metal and 1 light bulb hanging from a wire. But to me it was my headquarters. I started storing recyclables there, keeping track of prices in a notebook. And slowly, other collectors began selling to me. They didn't want to deal with buyers, I did. I became the middleman. Every night, I'd sit in that cold container, my hands black with grease, and whisper to myself, "You're not in the trash business. You're in the value business." The world didn't see me yet, but I was building something quietly, bottle by bottle, deal by deal. One day, while selling metal scraps, a man in a suit stopped by and watched me work. He asked, "Where do you get all this from?" I shrugged. "Everywhere no one else looks." He smirked and said, "That's the best answer I've heard all year." He handed me his card, a recycling company executive. "Call me when you're ready to scale," he said. And then he walked away. That night, I held that card like it was made of gold. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. And that's when I knew. I wasn't done collecting bottles. I was collecting momentum. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the business card under the flickering light of my container, the man's name printed in clean, expensive ink. It felt like holding a ticket to a world I'd never been invited to. But I wasn't ready to call him yet. Not until I had something real to show. So I kept working. Harder than ever. Days blurred together, dawn to dusk, alley to alley. Rain, snow, heat, it didn't matter. Every sound of glass clinking into my cart was like a heartbeat. Every sale was a step forward. 3 months later, I had 5 collectors working under me. We were small, rough, and broke. But we were organized. I taught them how to sort, how to negotiate, how to see value where no one else did. Most of them were like me, forgotten people. Homeless. Ex-cons, dropouts. Society had written them off. But now we had purpose. We called ourselves Second Chance. It wasn't just a name. It was who we were. One morning, while dropping off sorted aluminum at the recycling plant, I met that man again, the one in the suit. He remembered me instantly. He smiled and said, "You didn't call." I looked at him, sweaty, exhausted, but proud. "I wasn't ready then," I said. "I am now." He asked to see my operation. 2 days later, he showed up. standing inside my rusty storage unit surrounded by piles of cans and bottles. He didn't say much, just walked around nodding, calculating. Then he said one sentence that changed my life. "You've got a system, all you need now is scale." He offered me a small partnership. He'd invest $5,000 to help me buy better equipment and trucks, and I'd manage the ground operations. It wasn't much to him, but to me it was everything. I didn't say yes immediately. I told him, "If I take your money, I'm not your employee." He grinned. "I don't invest in employees. I invest in fighters." That day, Second Chance Recycling was officially born. The first few months were brutal. Machines broke. Trucks got stuck. Collectors quit. But I refused to stop. Every time something went wrong, I reminded myself, "You've already survived worse." Slowly, the city started noticing us. We weren't just collecting bottles anymore. We were cleaning streets, reducing waste, creating jobs. Local news picked up our story. "Homeless man builds recycling startup," the headline said. People started donating equipment. Volunteers came to help. And then, the call that changed everything. A huge beverage company wanted to hire us to handle their bottle returns. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. We went from one storage container to a full warehouse in 2 months. The man in the suit? He became my business partner. But I never let myself forget where I came from. Every week, I visited the old bus stop where I used to sleep. Sat there with a coffee and just looked around. The same wind, the same sounds, but I wasn't the same man. 2 years later, Second Chance Recycling was a citywide operation. We had 40 employees, 5 trucks, and partnerships with 3 major companies. I wasn't rich yet, but I was free. Then came the full circle moment. One day, a young guy showed up at our gate. Dirty clothes, nervous eyes. He said quietly, "Hey, I heard you hire people like me. I've been collecting bottles, just trying to survive." I looked at him and saw myself from 5 years ago. I handed him gloves and said, "Then you're exactly the kind of person I want." That day I realized something important. I hadn't built a company. I'd built hope. Months later, when we finally hit our first million in revenue, I stood in front of my crew, the same people the world had thrown away, and said, "We used to dig through garbage. Now we build futures." They cheered, laughed, cried. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Late that night, when everyone went home, I sat in my office, a real one this time with walls and a window, and pulled out that old newspaper I'd kept all these years. The one that said, "College dropout builds $2 million recycling company." I smiled. Then I took a pen, crossed out the headline, and wrote my own beneath it. "Homeless man turns trash into purpose." Success wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning of another war, one fought in silence. At first, everything felt unreal. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Investors, journalists, even politicians wanted interviews. Everyone wanted to know how the homeless bottle collector built $1 million company. They called me an inspiration. They called me a miracle. But they didn't see what was happening behind the scenes. I barely slept. I stopped eating right. Every deal, every meeting, every headline, it felt like a test I couldn't afford to fail. Because deep down I was terrified. Terrified that it could all vanish, just like everything else once had. My success was built from trash, but so were the doubts in my head. One night, my business partner, the man in the suit, said something that hit me harder than any insult ever could. We were sitting in the office at 2 a.m., surrounded by paperwork and empty coffee cups. He looked at me and said, "You built this company to survive, but now it's time to learn how to live." I didn't answer, because I didn't know how. For years, pain was my fuel. And now that I wasn't struggling to eat or sleep under bridges, I didn't know who I was anymore. So I started doing something new. Every Friday, I shut down the office early. I'd gather my team, the same people who once collected bottles beside me, and we'd walk the old routes. Not to work, just to remember. We'd hand out food, gloves, clean water to the homeless. Not as charity, but as a message. You're not done yet. It grounded me, reminded me why I started. A year later, we opened our first international branch, in another struggling city just like the one I came from. We partnered with shelters, rehab centers, even schools. We didn't just recycle materials anymore. We recycled lives. We built programs to train people in logistics, coding, finance, skills to give them a second chance too. Our motto changed from turning waste into worth to turning pain into power. But success attracts eyes, and not all of them were kind. Big corporations tried to buy us out. Competitors tried to crush us. They offered me millions, more than I ever dreamed of. But I refused, because selling out meant selling our story. And that was something money could never buy. One executive laughed in my face when I said no. He said, "You think your little charity business can compete with us?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "We're not competing. We're correcting." He didn't laugh after that. Now, when I walk through our warehouse, I see faces, tired, scarred, but smiling. People who were once invisible, now wearing uniforms with pride. Every truck that rolls out of our gate carries more than recyclables. It carries redemption. And when I look at the mirror these days, I don't see the man who dug through trash. I see the man who dug himself out of it. A journalist once asked me, "If you could go back in time and change your past, would you?" I thought about that bus stop, the nights I went hungry, the days I felt like a ghost in my own city. And I said, no, because pain built me stronger than comfort ever could. Today people call me a success story, but I don't believe in success. I believe in progress, because as long as there's one person out there feeling invisible, my story isn't done, and maybe it never will be.